Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to WatchBox, and thanks for logging on. If you love everything you see here is for sale, and anything you seek is in the description below with names, references, and when available, prices just below the box in the description. tmosso at thewatchbox.com. Reach out directly to me for your purchase and pricing questions. I have all of the answers, and we are always looking to buy one watch or an entire collection, no upper limit on value. Again, if you're looking to sell, reach out to me again, tmosso at thewatchbox.com. Now, let's jump straight in with a big piece. Late 1990s Zenith Daytona, 16520 with a gorgeous combination of silver registers and black lacquer dial. This one is in outstanding condition. Taking a quick look at some of the calling cards of a really good late 90s Daytona, you can see just how even the lugs are from side to side. You can see how sharp is the break from the satin finished hoods to the polished case blank. No dents, no marks, no deformation, nothing to reduce the symmetry or the volume or the sharpness of the lugs from end to end or side to side. Now, the nice thing about any post-1988 Rolex Daytona, and this one is an A-series, is the fact that once on the wrist, it looks like a modern Daytona. More than any other watch in the Rolex catalog, the Daytona has remained the same design through all of its automatic winding generations. And the timepiece is 100 meters, water-resistant, automatic, chronometer certified. It features a sapphire crystal. Though a certifiable vintage classic and a true investment-grade watch, this is still a timepiece you can wear and use as a modern Rolex watch. And the Daytona, as ever, is nice and thin. Inside caliber 40-30, El Primero-based with a few upgrades. Free-sprung instead of a mobile stud index. Overcoil instead of a flat hairspring. It features a 28.8 rather than 36,000 beat rate for easier servicing and use with conventional lubricants. And of course, Rolex certified these as chronometers, which was not true of the stock El Primero. Column wheel actuation still very crisp to this day. Tough, collectible, and rare, as Zenith only had the capacity to make about 25,000 movements a year in each year of the 90s, split between their own watches, their other clients, and of course the Daytona project. And remember, not all Zenith movements were El Primeros, so these were constrained by Zenith's production capacity, not Rolex's, ensuring they will always be rare. Now, taking a quick look at a watch that is discontinued and much loved, this is the black on black GMT, 6-digit super case, ceramic bezel insert, 3 time zones, green GMT script, green GMT 24-hour hand. Throw it on the wrist, and you can see that there is a sort of air de famille about these watches, as there's certainly a Rolex look, and this watch has it in spades. A little bit less chaotic on the wrist than some of the two-tone bezels. This is designed to be more of a discreet upscale option, more for the armchair aviator than the actual pilot, but it has all of the heritage of the model that first debuted with Pan Am pilots back in 1954. And of course, as a GMT-Master II rather than GMT-Master, it has the ability to tell 3 time zones simultaneously, provided you set the green 24-hour hand to Greenwich Mean. You can manipulate that local time zone independently, or you can pull the crown out, hack the movement, and now everything moves in sync. The green hand moves once around the dial every day, a 24-hour display, a 24-hour bezel, and you use the GMT offset to tell that 3rd time zone. Bezel insert is in ceramic, but the actual deposits for the numerals and the indices, that is platinum infill within the bezel. 100 meters water resistant, so this is absolutely surface and even light submergence swimmable. This is a watch for seaplane pilots, not just pilots. This is absolutely a water wing aviator's watch, just not as much as this one. 300 meters water resistant, and of course the latest and greatest thing, this is the current no-date sub. 2 ways to tell. First, you can see the little Rolex crown between Swiss and Made. Second, you can see the reference, 124060. All the good stuff inside the new 70-hour power reserve, the 41-millimeter case, and remarkably only 12.5 millimeters thick. These are nice, thin watches. So unlike almost every other dive watch on the market, the Rolex diver is actually thin enough to easily be a dress watch. And the timepiece, of course, has that immunity to planned obsolescence as the very first Rolex Submariner references of 1953, heck, even the prototypes are still recognizably still the same watch that you see right here. No date sub, also known as a Submariner. Technically, there are Submariners and Submariner dates, and this is a Submariner. A big upgrade that you get compared to the other 2 you just saw is the glide lock system. 20 millimeters of incremental adjustment in 2-millimeter increments. It allows you to size the watch. Now, you can pull it all the way out and fold it over a dive suit or a thick winter coat. or you can make small incremental adjustments to better fit your wrist as it expands or contracts. Double locking clasp, as you can see, a handsome looking watch, classical good looks, ceramic bezel, and of course you have that 120 click. And nothing glides like a Rolex dive bezel. It is both precise and very smooth. Let's do a quick lume shot here. You can see Rolex Chromolite lume, quite handsome, lustrous, luminous, bright, and blue, and of course, all three hands loomed on the dial, as it should be with every dive watch. A large and sapphire-capped luminescent pearl. Rolex cuts no costs. Well done in every regard. Now, let's jump to some timepieces that are distinctly different from the norm. Let's talk about three from H. Moser Cie. Based out of Schaffhausen, Switzerland, yes, the home of IWC, but producing only 1,500 watches a year, H. Moser Cie is becoming regarded as the German-Swiss FP Journe. So with only 1,500 watches made each year, a timepiece such as this 1 of 50 Endeavour Perpetual Moon Concept Aventurine is an absolute standout. Of course, the concept dial is the most minimal that Moser offers. No indices, no printing, no text, nothing to sully the appearance of this glorious fired aventurine glass dial with mineral deposits and metallic flakes inserted to create the twinkle of the cosmos and the depth of infinite space. Now, the moon phase has an accuracy of over 1,000 years, so it's basically set it and forget it. And impressively, the moon phase complication here was designed by Andreas Streller. Yes, AHCI luminary and a peer to FP Journe. As you can see, stainless steel case, 42 millimeters. They're not making you pay for precious metal here. You're getting steel and the watchmaking that is within. Hollowed, concave, mirror-polished case blanks, vertical satin finish on the sides, a lovely little kerf to dig your nail in behind the crown more easily. And as you can see, the concave profile bezel expands at 12 and at 6. There's a little stub indicator on the dial that lets you know where you are in the 24-hour cycle, so you can set the moon phase that one time you do. And of course, the movement, which is HMC 801, twin mainspring barrels, 7-day rated, 9-day actual power reserve indicator on the case back, 18K beat rate. We'll get as close as we can. You can see it is a free sprung balance with a full balance bridge for shock resistance, a handmade overcoil hairspring, the better to pass through multi-position testing with ease, a 14 karat gold low friction escapement. The escapement, the balance, the hairspring, all of that made in-house by Moser. You can see there's a 3/4 style bridge, evocative of old Moser pocket watches of the 19th and early 20th century. 2 mainspring barrels, each set in a golden chaton fixed by blued screws. In addition to those double-crested Côte de Genève, there's a lovely satination on the wheels, black polishing on all screw heads, a swan's neck style pocket watch inspired click. It is very good looking. We'll throw this one on the wrist, take a quick look. 42 millimeters is large for a dress watch, but you can see that the lugs are rather short, stubby, and tightly downturned, so it looks darn good. It even slips underneath the cuff. A handsome watch, real in steel, and gorgeous on the dial side. It is a deep, almost navy, lustrous blue. It is effectively enamel with metallic elements added to create that aventurine dial. From aventurine glass to absolute black, this is the H. Moser Cie Venturer vantablack Hands XL. I know, a big name for a big watch, but at 43 millimeters, this is a large timepiece that splits the difference between a sports watch and a dress watch. Stainless steel, so durable and everyday practical, the watch features a dial made of a carbon nanotube material called vantablack, and because of the reflectivity of the crystal, you're not getting the most of it on camera, but it absorbs 99.965% of all light. Now you can also see that the hands have been blackened here. They're easy to see in person, but it is a bewitching bottomless kind of black when you see it. The timepiece is nicely sculpted just as the Endeavour is. It's a little bit more, I would say, spare in its details, as the case is thinner and broader than on the Endeavour, and you can see there is a distinctly domed bezel to set the two apart. Underneath the case back, manual wind HMC 327, again their own movement. This one has a 3-day power reserve, also with a case back power reserve indicator, manual wind, free sprung, full balance bridge. You can see no surprises there. It is a very handsome little movement that also features an overcoil hairspring and an 18K beat rate that has a wonderful pocket watch like chug-a-chug against the ear. Now, in spite of the size, you can see it's actually quite flat and thin, easily sliding underneath the cuff. It is an exotic. For Moser, this kind of watch is a signature of the brand. There are very few companies that deliberately omit any mention of the country of manufacture or the brand on the dial, and yet you can tell at a glance who made this watch. Fans of high horology, independent horology, craft horology, and avant-garde Swiss design instantly know that when you see the concept dial unadorned, that's a Moser. That said, the company has many signature dials, and the funky blue fumet is probably the signature Moser color. It's two things. First, it's that color, funky blue. Second, it is the fumet, or the fade, from bright at the center to dark at the edge. Now, this is a 10-piece Moser Endeavor perpetual calendar in blackened titanium. It is feather light. It is only 40.8 millimeters, which means, unlike the big boys we just saw, this is a watch for many different wrist sizes. Your wrist is as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference. You're going to wear this one easily, especially if you're not pulling it tight the way I am. I'm just trying to hold it secure without strapping it down because we have a lot of ground to cover. But you can see this is a much more conventional dial, even as it's a bit more cheerful, colorful, and expressive than some of the dark and brooding concepts we just saw. There is a lot of light and luster coming off this dial. Let's talk a little bit about the perpetual calendar system. I mentioned Andreas Streller's moon phase, and he also designed the perpetual calendar system for Moser, and you can see how it's bi-directional. I'm actually turning it back and forth right here. Now, it adjusts differently than it actually drives itself, so if you're wondering why we're jumping between the 29th of June and the 1st of July. The reason for that is just the quickset works differently than when it's driving itself. But you have a little stub index that points to the hours, 12 hours, 12 months, and then of course you have the date. That's how the system works, and you can adjust it in both directions. As with the Aventurine, 7-day rated, 9-day actual power reserve, turn it all over, the movement is absolutely gorgeous. All the tech specs that were true of the Aventurine are also true here. Same power reserve, same basic architecture. You can see it's contained in a slightly smaller case, and that's one thing Moser does that's fascinating, building the movement properly sized to the case, and you can see in each instance that has been done. You can also see that there's a bit more to see, as there is a central leap year phase indicator that you adjust with a pusher on the side. This is 1 of 10, so you could probably guess the serial number, at least the primary serial number. Again, you've got that solid gold escapement and the overcoil, the free sprung, the full balance bridge, all made in-house. But what I didn't mention last time is that the entire assembly lifts out as one piece. So when this goes into a regional service affiliate for Moser in any major region, they're going to pull out that assembly and stick in a pre-serviced assembly from Switzerland so they can speed the watch back to you. That is one of the advantages. And in case you're wondering, yes, it does have hacking seconds. Featherlight, universally wearable, very handsome. Everything you saw on the Aventurine case and steel, you see here in black and titanium. Now, something very, very special just crossed my desk. This is a set launched in 2017 to celebrate 60 years of 3 different models. We have the 1957 Trilogy collection. Now, there were 3,557 examples of each model made, but there were only 557 sets with custom dials and matched serial numbers. And if you look carefully right here, each one of these is matched serial 459. The references you're looking at, or at least the references to which tribute is paid, are respectively the 2913 Seamaster 300, the 2914 Railmaster, and the 2915 Speedmaster. They're very close in size and incredibly faithful in detail. As you can see, although each one features a sapphire, there's that small stamped Omega logo on the underside of the crystal, just as there would have been on the original plexiglass. Now, the Speedmaster is 38.6. The Seamaster is 39 millimeters, and the Railmaster is 38 millimeters. And each of these watches would have been nominally part of the Seamaster family back in 1957 as water-resistant watches, and that is the reason each one features the hippocampus or seahorse on the back. Now, there are some substantial upgrades to these watches, and they center primarily around the clasps and the bracelets, which, as you can see, are modern in construction, even if there are nods to vintage style included. You can see with the Seamaster, there is a slider for incremental sizing, but what you'll also appreciate is that each one of these features that slider for incremental sizing. So while the watches are vintage evocative, the features, the robustness, the assembly quality is very much modern. Of course, the Railmaster is probably the most unusual of the trio, though I happen to find the Seamaster to be the most practical, largely because of its diving style bezel. It is not a diving bezel because, like the original, it is bi-directional. You'll also note, in a little bit of a variance from modern day ISO statute, we have not just the bi-directional, but an unconventional count, let's align properly, a count down bezel. So you can see how it is counting down rather than counting up. This is a fascinating, almost mission timer-like bezel that's a little bit more similar to what I have on my Zenith ECM 1.1. All of these timepieces are wearable on small wrists, and as you can see, each one of these features the identical serial number 459. So if you want the ultimate in classic and collectible Omega, this is a future investment grade trilogy if you've got the trio. Caliber 1861 Moonwatch, 8806, 8806. So the movement in the two Railmaster and Seamaster, those are the movements that you will find minus date in the Seamaster Diver 300 meter, whereas this is the now retired Moonwatch Caliber 1861. Note the use extensively of vintage Omega logos, vintage Omega scripts and marquee. You will find them repeatedly across the watch, on the clasp, on the crown, as well as on the dial. And of course, uniquely among the three, and true to history, the Speedmaster alone has the applique Omega logo on the dial. I am all about matching sets today, and here we have a limited edition of 8 matched pair of platinum 40 millimeter FP Journe timepieces. Now, they are not matching serial, but they are matched set. These would originally have been sold as a set with a wall clock for Swiss Fine Timing of Chicago. 8 examples were made of each. You have the Chronomètre Souverain, and you have the Octa-chronograph. The chronograph is fascinating because it is a flyback chronograph with a 5+ day power reserve. All of them feature that lush tricolor of blue, red, and white, or silver white, with the exception of the white gold dial elements peeking through on the chronograph. Now, in addition to being just objectively gorgeous, these are sometimes called the tricolore among the FP Journe collectible pieces. That wasn't the intent, as again, this was a Chicago dealer, but they do match the colors of the flag of FP Journe's ancestral land. The timepieces are both flat, gorgeous, and hugely charismatic, with more color, character, and charm than your average FP Journe Chronomètre Souverain or Octa-chronograph. The timepieces are also thin in the traditional FP Journe form, and as you can see, both of them feature the discontinued Eleanor French-made case, which is nice refinement and an evocative double hallmarked and maker's marked sort of sign of their times. Prior to 2008, FP Journe cases would have been made by Eleanor of France. So you see Eleanor's maker's mark, well, there it is right there, and then you can see the French hallmarks adjacent to it. The movement, of course, is rose gold. This is the Chronomètre Souverain. It hasn't changed much since 2005 when it debuted. 56-hour power reserve, 2 barrels, 6 position rather than standard 5 position adjustment, and the entire movement made of 18 karat gold bridges and plates. Now, jumping over to the chronograph real quick, this one, of course, is a lovely combination of blue hands, silver sub-registers, black, red, and the matte white gold of the dial base. Now, there is a flyback function for the chronograph, which is a wonderful and practical refinement when you need to time 2 events in rapid succession. It also features a big date, making it the last FP Journe chronograph until the chronograph Monopoussoir à Trois to feature a date on a chronograph, as the Centograph featured no such thing. You can see these lovely black polished silver inner bezels framing the upper and lower dial. And then on the case back, you have the Octa Caliber 1300, which has 18 karat rose gold bridges stitches and plates just like the 1304, but it also features a true rose lathe cut guilloche, sort of grandeur or barleycorn pattern 22 karat winding mass. It beats away at 21.6, which is an intermediate beat rate, but FP Journe resists shock and concussion-induced timing deviation with a very large and massive balance. It's also free sprung for stability against shock, and as you can see, nicely finished, combination of manual and mechanical finishing, as is true with every FP Journe watch. And as you can see, this case, likewise, built by Eleanor of Paris. A lovely pair. They are going to be sold together, and they are very, very special and highly collectible. At any given time, there will not be one nor the other on the market. The opportunity to buy both together is a rare one for FP Journe connoisseurs who want the ultimate in exclusivity, color, and character. Let's talk about two watches after my own heart. I've loved HYT since they launched their first watches back in the early 2010s. 2011 was the coming out year for the brand, and while I loved their H1 design, it was simply too big for my wrist. I followed them closely over the years, cheering them from the sidelines and voicing my support on social media, but it wasn't until 2017 when I first saw the HYT fit for my wrist, and that was the H0. As you can see, the H0 is a lugless case design. Though 48.8 millimeters in diameter, that's also the distance across the wrist, meaning the actual distance across the wrist for this HYT is less than the absolute distance from link to link across the wrist with the Rolex. And of course, that's the GMT right there. So if you can wear a 40 millimeter Rolex, you can wear this watch. Don't be intimidated. Now, this is the model I choose for myself, primarily with a sapphire cap and a stainless steel bottom case. Because the sapphire is so all-enveloping, remarkably cambered and boxed, domed, projecting from the case base all the way to the top of the watch, it effectively blocks any scratch that could possibly mar the case. So this becomes effectively a scratch-proof watch, and if you thought ceramic was scratch-resistant, sapphire is even more so. Now, not everyone is into the mean green look. For them, this watch makes more sense. Mechanically identical. It's the HYT H101 movement designed by Chronode for HYT. HYT handled the fluidic elements. Chronode handled the actual Swiss lever movement. Manual wind, 65-hour power reserve, and cam action on two different bellows. One contains a clear liquid, one contains a green liquid. The fun thing is you can see the immiscible liquids are separated by a little meniscus that indicates the hour. So, for example, I'll pull the crown out here right now, and I will turn the time to 6, because you can see the minute hand retrogrades right back and starts another track around the dial. You can see it is seconds, minutes, and hours. It is a regulator. It's also a retrograde. And the 65 hours of power reserve can be read on the power reserve indicator at 2:30 on the dial. It has wonderful dial depth, and you can actually see the bellows. If you're wondering about temperature, it's not a problem, as HYT has assured me that these watches, although theoretically limited by upper and lower temperature extremes, they can never reach those extremes when they're physically being worn on the wrist, because your wrist will alternately heat or cool in those extreme temperatures. Now, the watch wears easily on the wrist. There's a full matching deployant clasp on the bottom, and the strap is a wonderfully supple and thin rubber. The timepiece looks great. It has lume. It's very special to see and a ton of fun to wear. One of the coolest independents going. Again, this is probably the crowd pleaser. This is the Tim pleaser right here, and you guys who know me already understand why. This is so beautifully green. I feel like it's Ruby Rod on The Fifth Element. It's so green. It's so green. And so is this strap. Olive green, that is. Now, this is the FP Journe Elegant 40 Titanite. So it's not the 48. It is a more compact, if you will, elegant mid-size. Now, as you can see, the timepiece on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist actually looks perfect. So if you've got a smaller wrist like mine, this is probably going to be a better fit for you than the 48. Well, I think the 48 is fine for a small wrist. A lot of folks have told me that they prefer the 40 if their wrists are smaller than 16 centimeters. Now, that surprises me a little bit because I think they're both wearable. They're both equally thin, and both of them feature the party trick that is germane to these elegant models, namely the fact that the watch has up to a 10-year battery service life on the wrist, and if left on standby, the battery can endure for 18 years. As you can see, one of the only worthwhile display casebacks ever placed on a quartz movement. It actually uses rear 18 karat gold on the cover for the battery. And of course, there's a wonderful printed circuit that looks just dreamy. This is a romantic watch, yes. But the real romance of this watch is in the idea behind it. You can see the oscillating mass on the dial. After 30 minutes, the watch goes to sleep. The hands stop moving, but the microprocessor remembers the time. When you pick it up, the mass moves, the hands reset in either direction, whichever one is closer to the current time. There is a hacking seconds function, and with a screw-down crown, this watch is rated to 30 meters, but FP Journe, or Montre Journe, the company, has assured me that it is tested past 50 meters, and they endorse it for swimming, the only Journe thusly approved. Now throw it into the dark and let there be light. The entire dial is a solid block of luminova. So you can see you're actually looking at the features of the dial backlit by that block. This is easily the best lume you will find on any sports watch, and it is a sports watch with a hard Titanite coating on top of grade 5 titanium. It is both extremely scratch resistant and extremely light. As you can see, there is a full matching deployant clasp. This is a special timepiece for a special kind of collector who has an appreciation both for mechanical luxury but also luxury quartz. Let's talk about a hard case, quite literally. Ceramic hard. If you want a scratch-proof watch, ceramic is the answer for you. Well, that is, unless you want to go full encompassing sapphire like HYT. But if you want a watch with a more conventional case, go with ceramic. Blue, white, black, it doesn't matter. It is super hard. And Omega, remarkably, is able to finish its ceramic the same as it would metal, so there's no cost in nuance. Launched in 2018, this is the Omega Speedmaster Moon Watch Blue Side of the Moon Aventurine, a follow-up to the Blue Side of the Moon of the previous year. It's 44.25 millimeters, almost entirely composed of sapphire and ceramic, very light on the wrist, and absolutely gorgeous. If you liked the Aventurine dial on the Moser, but you don't quite have Moser coin, this is the answer. The same high-quality aventurine glass dial with a more sophisticated movement in some regards, as it is a master chronometer, which means a fully cased-up chronometer test that goes beyond the COSC to include winding efficiency, power reserve, water resistance, shock resistance, and anti-magnetism. This movement has it all. 60-hour power reserve, you have a moon phase, you have a chronograph. Of course, you have a date, and you've got a wonderful combination of that lustrous enamel-like dial base, and it is basically a fired glass-like enamel, and then the handsome rose gold elements added on top with a laser-ablated moon phase just below in a crescent-style aperture. Now the timepiece, of course, is a vertical clutch column wheel chronograph, and if we flip everything over, you can actually see that the column wheel is visible through a skeletonized bridge. As with the Moser and the Rolex, you can see that it has a full balance bridge with a free-sprung index for shock resistant. Unlike the Rolex and the Moser, it features a silicone hairspring, so it's not just anti-magnetic, it is amagnetic, completely resistant, going above and beyond, basically able to bear the brunt of anything short of a particle accelerator. Throw it on the wrist, and though it's a big watch, you'll find that the blue side is wearable. It's not long across the wrist. Its main dimension is its thickness. But if that looks reasonable to you, and for a sports-style watch, it looks reasonable to me, you're going to be very happy with the way this sits. Sapphire, front and back, is very light. Ceramic, likewise, is very, very light. And if you hate disfigured, scratched, and scuffed watches, ceramic is going to be the answer for you. Let's do a quick lume shot here. And that is the blue side of the moon right there. So you can see the blue side's actually quite legible at night. And if you're wondering, that is the HYT. So if you're wondering, how can I tell the time on that watch at night? Here is the answer right there. And you can actually see the separation between the two sides of the liquids, the immiscible liquids, the meniscus between them. It is completely readable, right down to the second sub-register at night. We're having too much fun today, guys. I'll be damned if it ain't haute de gamme. This is a fantastic way to blow the kids' college fund on rose gold. As good as it gets from Geneva and Glasuta, I have the Patek Philippe 5070R, part of a sub run of 5070s made from 2004 to 2008, about 250 examples of this 42mm glory were built. And when the original yellow gold model debuted at Basel in 1998, it was glorious. Huge for a dress watch by 1998 standards. The 42mm watch actually drew its appearance from a pilot's prototype in the Patek Museum. So as you can see, there's a lot going on with concentric rings about the dial, sunken sub-registers, rose gold applique Arabic numerals cut by the registers, and leaf-style hands. The timepiece is beautiful in profile with a stacked pagoda-like bezel structure. And if you look at the lugs here, this is the first thing I look at. I look at the lug fluting on a 5070 when I want to judge its condition. Here you can see it is deep and it is sharp. It may be entirely original, and it's quite likely that this has not been touched since it left Geneva. The other thing I look at is the sharpness of the case edge and the sharpness of the edge of the bezel. They should be absolute razor-like, and they should catch a thin, narrow beam of light, just like you're seeing here. So this is a watch that represents one of the most important modern Patek complications, one of the design landmarks of its era, and one of the most collectible ultra haute de gamme watches available in the best possible condition. Throw it on my wrist, which of course is 16 centimeters in circumference, and you can see it's not a broad watch across the wrist. The case is broad, but the lug spacing is about 48 millimeters, meaning again, if you can wear that 40mm Rolex, you can wear this. The dial is difficult to describe other than to say it's not a simple silver. It's a darker, grayer, ballsier silver. Think Alubeam on Mercedes-AMG or Audi Avis silver, and you get the idea. CH2770. Few upgrades from Patek. Patek does away with the flat hairspring on the Lamagna base, goes with an overcoil made by hand. Does away with the standard finish, raises it to Poinçon de Genève or Geneva seal. Does away with the mobile stud index regulator, and it adjusts in 6 positions and adds a free-sprung Gyromax style regulator and balance. And of course, you have a capped column wheel with a black polished cap screw, and the power reserve goes from the Lamagna standard 48 to Patek's 65. The column wheel action is best in the business, and you can see that both the minute hand and the chronograph seconds hand have been rolled on a mini rolling pin to arc underneath the edge of the sapphire and reduce distortion. Now you can see the finish is glorious. This is old school, mirrored beveling on the edge, not just of the bridges, but you can also see of the steel components of the chronograph. Satin finish across these steel chronograph components, black polished screws with chamfered slots and chamfered circumference, Côte de Genève perfectly aligned across the rhodium-plated brass bridges. And you can see not only is there a mirrored bevel on the edge of every chronograph component and bridge, but you can see every jewel and screw countersink features the same level of mirrored polish. There's also engine turning on the base plate, and all of the wheels feature satination on their tops and bottoms. Truly special, and this one includes a full deployant clasp. Jumping out for a second. By the way, let's see the column wheel and lateral clutch in action, because this is what you're paying for. At Patek Philippe, the most experienced chronograph watchmakers work on the lateral clutch rather than the vertical clutch. The vertical clutch is industrial and wrote to service. The lateral clutch needs to be hand adjusted every time it's reassembled. It takes more skill. At Lange S&ouml, they have their own measures of skill and their own measures of refinement. Now, this is not a complication at face value. It is a 40.5mm rose gold Richard Lange pour le mérite. A model that came out in 2009, it's deceptively complex and refined. This was a 200-piece limited edition in rose gold with a fired enamel dial, and you can see there is one disc of white enamel on top of secondary discs below for the center dial, and then another below for the sub-seconds. Now, the watch does feature hacking or stop seconds and lovely mirror-polished and fired blue steel alpha-style hands. The Grand Faux enamel dial is handsome, lustrous, and engrossing, with a combination of blue hands, red highlights at the quarters, black printing, and it has a little bit of an off-white color to it, so there's some creaminess and warmth that matches nicely to the rose gold. The movement is caliber L044, and what sets it apart is not the finish, which is Baroque, but the fusée and chain. Every Lange that features Pour le Mérite since the original 1994 Pour le Mérite Tourbillon, it features a fusée and chain, a pocket watch style constant force device invented in the late Renaissance. Now you can see there's a bicycle chain, and then there is a fusée, or I should say, there is a barrel and a fusée with 636 individual links strung between them. The fusée chain is only 1/4 of a millimeter wide. It's 20 centimeters long, and it's strong enough to suspend 2 kilograms. Now you can see there's a planetary system inside the fusee, and that allows me to wind the watch without interrupting the flow of power to the escapement. The point of the fusee is to deliver constant force as the barrel runs down to the escapement. What happens is you wind, and the chain moves from the barrel to the fusee, and then as it unwinds and the barrel winds down, the fusee has a spiral around it, like the cogs of a bicycle at the back. And effectively what happens is the chain climbs to a larger and larger circumference up that sort of rounded inclined plane, eventually turning the broadest diameter of the fusee, which in turn drives the escapement, when the balance, or when I should say the mainspring, is at its lowest ebb. So when there's the least amount of force in the mainspring, the fusee gives the greatest mechanical advantage to ensure constant force to the escapement. Note black polishing on the ratchet gear with the click spring and the click atop the barrel, as well as the black polishing of the cap of the escape wheel and the swan's neck regulator, as well as the case clamp screws. You have both fired and black polished screws here. You have 2 freehand engraved structures. No two are exactly alike. You have engine turning both on the balance cock and the base plate, and then glasuta stripes across the bridges. You can see that there's mirrored anglage on the edge of every bridge, and because there are cutaways in the bridge to show you the fusee and chain, you get more rounded anglaged surfaces than on a standard Lange 3/4 style bridge. And of course, these glasuta stripes have a wonderful, deep, rich ribbing to them. The golden alloy used is nickel copper zinc, often known as German silver, and it's the copper that gives it that golden hue compared to the silvered rhodium brass of conventional Swiss movements. And of course, everything you see here, right down to that alloy, is a tribute to the pocket watch era of a Lange und Söhne production. There is a full deploying clasp, which is not universal on Lange watches. It is a nice refinement and upgrade on this one. De Bethune of L'Auberson, a company that since 2002 has made less than 3,000 watches. They make 150 watches a year today. But many feel that the signature DB28 is just too extravagant, too large, too unusual, too weird looking. They don't like the open dial, the barrel bridge. It looks like a Starfleet badge. It looks like a Star Trek reference. Well, you don't need that with de Bethune, because this is the DB25 Power Reserve, and it's 40 millimeters by 11.5 millimeters wide with conventional lugs and a solid guilloche cut dial. De Bethune invests heavily. They make their own guilloche dials cut on their own rose lathes. They make their own cases, and of course they make their own movements. Not only is this a 6-day power reserve, but it is an automatic winding 6-day power reserve. 1, 2, 3 shock protection springs on the balance, both for durability and for chronometry, to rapidly reset the balance staff as quickly as possible. You have a balance that's made alternately of titanium and platinum masses, and it's non-annular. It's shaped like a yoke. You can see that at center, there are cantilevered springs with non-stiction jewels inserted, designed to protect the winding bearing from shocks, and then outboard, as far from the center as possible, you have a platinum rather than a gold mass. The point of all this is chronometry and durability, and the timepiece looks the part on the wrist. This is a timepiece that is classically gorgeous, so if you love de Bethune's innovations in hairsprings, balances, power reserve, style, you get all of that here. You get all of the science that Denis Flageolet and his innumerable patents have poured into the brand's product, but you get it without the extroverted Lamborghini for the wrist aesthetic. This isn't Starfleet, it's not Lamborghini, it's certainly not Bugatti, except in specification, and the magic of this one is hidden under a dial that you can wear with a straight face in a tux. That said, the straight faces go out the window the second somebody pulls out the 2002 Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Concept. Now, a few thoughts about this watch. First, it's not an offshore. It's the Royal Oak Concept, and it was the first Royal Oak Concept designed by Claude Emenega. It was a almost tribute-style watch to the history of the Royal Oak, as that was 2002, the anniversary of the original 1972 5402, and they wanted to break as much ground as the original 15202 did. And so they went deep with Audemars Piguet Renault et Papy, the ultimate haute de gamme within Audemars Piguet. These are the people who built the $1 million Richard Mille movements, and you can see some similarity. Let's start with the case. 44 millimeters in alacrite. Again, that's an unusual material, but more than anything, it's made of cobalt. It is made of cobalt, chromium, and tungsten. If that sounds like it's going to be very hard, it is. It is 430 Vickers. Remember, standard steel 316 is about 250 at best. So that's the case. It's made of alacrite 602. It's a combination of cobalt, chromium, and tungsten. There's double finishing with media blasting and polish, and you can see that the edges of this one are razor sharp, never refinished. Everything is as crisp as the day it left Les Brassus. The bezel is made of titanium grade 5, and if it appears to be a little bit rounded off toward its edges, it was made that way. These watches are all delightfully handmade, and they show evidence of having been crafted in that fashion. Most of the Royal Oaks and offshores are far more automated than the production process for this watch. Now you can see that the bezel changed here. Not only is the crystal cambered, but the entire bezel is actually wrapped across the top, draped and melted as though it had been superheated and flattened across the surface to conform. You can see there is a hexagonal crown as with a traditional Royal Oak. There's also a secondary next to it. This is a system that would become well known to Richard Mille collectors, a multifunction crown with a clutch system to sort between its functions. So you have neutral, remontage, which is winding. This is where you wind the watch. It does have a screw-down crown. It is 100 meters water resistant. And you can see that the linear power reserve at 3 o'clock elevates toward the top as I wind the watch. But you can also see that the dynamograph effectively giving you a measure of the torque in the hairspring. So not just a measure of how much power reserve remains, but also how much torque the mainsprings are putting out. Now the thing about the watch is it has a 70+ hour power reserve, so the scale is a little bit counterintuitive until you learn its calibration better. You have that multifunction crown, and again, you don't actually pull the crown out here. You simply change the mode. For H, which is you now have a visible motion works at center. You can see that driving the hands. The watch is loomed. And finally, when I'm done setting, I put it into neutral, and now you can see the crown does nothing. Screw it all down. This is a swimmable watch. It is fully loomed. It is manual wind, and unusually for a highly shock-resistant watch, it features no actual Inca block or kiff on the balance staff, and that's because the tourbillon carriage has this elaborate shock-resistance system. A semi-coiled titanium spring on each side, effectively forming a upper bridge for the tourbillon carriage. So this watch is extraordinarily shock resistant, but in a way that no other watch at its time was. Now internally, APRP finishes things better than anything else you'll find at Audemars Piguet. They are uncompromising, and their client list reads like a who's who of high horology. The timepiece features a 21/6 beat rate for its tourbillon, which is made of titanium and all components black polished, including screws. It is free sprung for shock resistance and has an overcoil hairspring, and you can see on the reverse side, this caliber, which is a monstrous caliber 2896, is almost fully evacuated, the better to appreciate its hand-finished titanium bridges and plates. And that's right, the inside of this watch, the movement itself, made of titanium. 150 pieces were made, and I can tell you, as a person who sees the rarest watches in the world every day of the week, this is the first one I've encountered that wasn't on someone's wrist. So if you want a true landmark watch, an absolute giant, literally and figuratively, in the world of horology, if you feel that your grand complication just can't be big enough, this is the one for you. Wrists smaller than 18 centimeters circumference need not apply. And frankly, you're probably going to need a bank account to match the wrist. Guys, that is the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak concept. I can't top that. Reach out to Tim Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.